Welcome back. So today we're going to be looking at easy key remap showcase video and also setup, because it's a really easy setup. All you need to do is head to your project settings, then down to enhanced input, user settings, and enable. You can then close that and head to this map that I've already got open, but if you need to find it, it's under easy key remap, enable content, example content, sorry. Maps, and then map underscore example content. So that's the map that we're in now. Once that's sorted, we're ready to go. So WASD lets you move around. Space is jump. 1, 2, 3 are your abilities. And you can open up the menu by pressing escape or Q. And that's for good reason. So I've rebound escape in my editor so that it actually opens this and doesn't stop play. And instead I put stop play on F1. But you can open the menu with Q as well, because by default escape stops play. So just for that little handy. Now the first things I'm going to talk about is control rebinding. So obviously you can rebind keys. So if I put W on jump, let's say instead, I can apply, and now if I press W, see I jump forward a little bit, and then when I land I start moving forward. So I'm just pressing and holding W here, pressing and holding, and so that's working nicely. So let's reset that. The other thing you can do is conflict detection. So obviously, if I press W on here, you can see that binding conflicts with another binding. And that's because move forward and jump both use spacebar. Sorry, they both use W. And you can enable and disable this. So if I just apply and save, and I close this, in your UI where you've enabled, let's open this up in the main window. So in your UI where you've added your controls list widget, which is the widget I provide that you can drag and drop into your menu, or you can use the menu that comes with example content, up to you. There's a config menu or a config dropdown. And so in here you can actually enable and disable those conflict bindings. So if I click play again, we'll just full screen this. W currently shows up on 2 rows, so there's a conflict with binding. However, if I use a binding that doesn't show up here, but is used by a different action, so one that's not mappable, for example Q, which opens up the menu, you'll get this message, which is binding conflicts with a non-mappable action, because opening this menu is an action, but it's not a mappable action. It's not one that I actually show up on this menu. So if I won't save that, so that when I press Q, it still shows you what I had before. So I can enable and disable those pop-ups. So if I disable mapping conflicts here, and I just compile, save, and run, when I press Q, you see there's no binding conflict message that shows up anymore, even though W appears in 2 rows. And if I close this and re-enable that, but I disable the non-mapping conflicts, we get the same thing, but the other way around. So now pressing Q here doesn't show that non-mapping conflict error. Now, what if I want to use W in 2 different contexts? Well, let's say spacebar. So maybe you want spacebar to be jump, and you want spacebar to be ability 1. Okay, so right now, if I were to do that, you would see that binding conflicts error. But let's say that I can use spacebar for jump, and I can use spacebar to maybe press accept when I'm in a menu context. So generally you want to be able to use the same key in different contexts. So I've got something called context grouping. So if I save that, because I'm going to need that later, I've got something called context grouping. We'll just enable that again, which allows you, and by default, I have the base character mapping context. Let's just widen this menu up quite a lot. So I've got base character and abilities in the same group at the moment. So context grouping allows you to add contexts which will check if there's conflicting bindings in the same group. But if they're in different groups, it won't check if they conflict. So if I remove abilities from this group, if I just delete it entirely from there, and I then click play, now spacebar doesn't show up as a conflict. If I did it here, it would show up, it conflicts here because movement is in its own group. but here it doesn't show up. Now, contexts that aren't in a group, so abilities is in its own mapping context and it doesn't show up in a group at all, won't have any conflicts inside itself either. So if you want that, if you want one to show up as a binding conflicts, then you would need to add it to its own group. So I'd make another group, I'd call it abilities, and I would add my mapping context abilities. So if I compile and save that, and I open up the menu now, when I press 1, it shows up. But because they're in different groups, I can put 1 here and it doesn't matter, or spacebar can be down here and that doesn't matter because they're in different groups. So let's reset all my abilities, all my key bindings to default. It's getting quite messy. And let's just also go back to here and change this. Oops. Scroll back up because I've accidentally clicked the wrong thing. Let's change this back to how it was. So let's delete this second entry and we'll add this back in here. All right, let's move on to another feature. So multiple columns. As you can see, we've got lots of column options here as well. So right now, by default, there are 3 columns. There are 3 columns, and as you can see in the far right, I've got gamepad buttons. In the far left, I've got keyboard buttons, and in the middle, I don't have anything. And I've been used in this middle column for my keyboard buttons, but if I just plug in my gamepad, which I should have done before this video, there we go. If I press a button on the keypad, nothing happens. So I ask for a key, I press a button, nothing gets bound, because I've set this middle column to be keyboard only, and this far right column to be gamepad only, and also the far left to be keyboard only. So some games allow certain columns to be only for certain devices, and this asset lets you do that as well. So if I go to this column and I press a button, you'll see that does bind, and it actually shows up as a conflict because I already used this button somewhere else. And so the way we set this up is, so right now I've got 3 columns, and you can set this up to be whatever you want. So if I go to 5, it'll show up as 5 columns. And let's leave it at 3. The way you can set this up is you can enable keyboard only or gamepad only columns. So if I if I disable these only columns and I come back here, you'll now see that I can put key bindings for the gamepad in the middle column and even in the first column, and I can put keyboard bindings in that third column. But we like to have our gamepad only and our keyboard only columns, so let's leave that as it is. But let's say I want the middle column to be my gamepad column, so I can actually change this range to say only the first column 1 to 1 is keyboard, and the gamepad column actually starts from 2 to 3. So now, because I've changed it to 2 and 3, the middle column will be a gamepad only column and won't allow any keyboard bindings. So if I go back into here and I try and do spacebar now, it doesn't work. It still works if I do it here, but if I do it here, it doesn't work. And that's because now I can use my gamepad buttons in this column and not keyboard buttons. Alright, so let's save that. Why not? Now, if you want that middle column to be free for all, you can also do that. So I can actually say from 3 to 3 is gamepad only, from 1 to 1 is keyboard only, and the second column, we're just going to leave it as a free for all. So now I can do both keyboard, now I can do both keyboard and I can do gamepad buttons in the middle column. But in the far left column, I still can't do gamepad, and in the far right, I still can't do keyboard. So that just allows you to really limit, add limitations, I should say, to your control mapping. And that sort of brings us to the end of this showcase video. If you have any questions or any comments or suggestions, feel free to reach out to me on my Discord or drop a comment in the YouTube video, but I do check my comments a lot less than I check Discord. So if you want to reach out to me quickly for some help, Discord is the best way to go, and that is linked in the description as well as on the Fab listing page. You can also find the documentation on the Fab listing page, and any updates that come I'll put in the Discord under the updates channel for this asset. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later.